Hello and welcome back to this build series. It's a rather cold and wet, dreary morning here. So moving on to the rest of the build now. I'm starting with the engine. It should be the chassis, but I'm starting with the engine. Just going back to the previous episode, the clear coat has had a chance to dry overnight and it's handleable now. I wouldn't like to do too much with it just yet because it'll still be curing, but it's dried to a fairly decent finish. Bit of orange peel, but nothing to worry about. If this was a car, I would be post polishing it because that shine just isn't acceptable for a car. For a truck though, it's perfectly fine. There's possibly, I'm going to do some light weathering on this anyway, just to add a little bit of realism. But to the engine, it's probably difficult for you to see because it's white parts on a white background, but I've got the various parts for the engine, the two halves of the block. Parts required a fair bit of cleanup. Just about every part needed to be cleaned up. That took me a couple of hours. I did that yesterday prior to starting this. These parts for the turbo, the four halves, for some reason Revel put them on the chrome plated sprue. Excuse me. I've not really any idea why, because they don't need to be chrome, they need to be painted. So I don't know why they decided to put those on as chrome plated parts. So they were stripped down using the foam type oven cleaners. Took a few passes to get them clean, but they came off eventually. So they'll get primed and painted along with everything else. So I'm not going to dwell on this too much. I'm going to get this partly assembled, bits that I can assemble prior to painting, and then I'll come back and we'll just go over how I'm going to paint them. So back in a moment. Okay, so I've partly assembled the engine. I've put on all of those parts are going to be the same colour apart from the cam belt, or one of the cam belts. I'll paint that in by hand after I've done everything else. The rest of the parts, for the most part, they all need to be the same colour, but just to make painting easier, I'm going to do those, assemble those afterwards, because like with this part here, if I put that on now, it's just going to make painting a little bit tricky and certainly weathering a little bit tricky. So I'll paint those separately and then assemble them together. Got the turbos assembled. For the turbos, I'm going to try and rust those up a bit by using something I bought a while back that I've never really had a chance to use. Just take the price sticker off. Something called this by Deluxe Materials. Never heard of them before. It was just an impulse buy. I just saw it when I was in a local model store, and so I thought I'd just grab it and give it a try. I did do a test when I first got it, and it was pretty good. Certainly a much easier way of doing pretty authentic looking rust rather than multi layers of paint, which I've done before to some success, but I'm still a little bit inexperienced in that area, so something I will practice a little bit more at some point in the future. So I'm going to get this painted. I'm still in two minds, or I have been in two minds about how to paint this, whether or not to heavily weather it, and I think I'm probably going to have a go at weathering it. So I'm going to use the old-fashioned hairspray method for chipping, which is just you paint whatever colour you want the chipping to be, you paint that first. So in my case, I wanted it to be a rusty colour, so I'm going to paint it in a mix of browns and oranges. You then, I'm just trying to remember because it's been a while since I've done this. I think you then put a clear coat over just to protect that paintwork, and you then just spray on some cheap hairspray. You can get proper chipping fluid, but I found hairspray works a lot better. Just any cheap hairspray will do, as long as it's not waterproof. And you just spray that over the part, then spray your main colour over, which for this, it's my research showed it was the Cummins engine, so it's going to be that horrible beigey colour. Once that's dry, you then just use some water and a stiff bristled brush, toothpick, anything, whatever works, just to reactivate the hairspray underneath and just chip off the top layer of paint, revealing the rusty colour beneath it. And it's a method I've used before, and it's quite effective. Sometimes it can be a little bit harder to do than others, depending on the paint that you use to go over the top. Tamiya paints, it works fairly well with the X and XF range anyway. I've never tried it with Mr. Hobby's Aqueous range, which is what I'm going to be doing this time, because it's probably one of those colours that I'm going to be using for the main colour of the engine. Probably that one, because that's a pretty close match to the colour of the Cummins engine. And then after that, that'll get all protected with a clear coat, and then I'll do some weathering with panel liner and various other. I've got a couple of the Tamiya Weathermaster sets. I might use some of those as well. I go into something like this with an idea of what I want, but I really just make it up as I go along. So I'm going to get on, and I'll come back after I've got the main colour coat applied, and then we'll go through how to do the chipping. I might have a go at doing that live on camera, just so that you can see how it works. So yeah, I will come back when we're ready. Right then, so we've got the engine block painted up, and it's had a coat of hairspray over it. So I'll just go over quickly what I've done. I will put some, hopefully, if my video editor allows me to do it, I will put some photographs, still shots up as well after each step. So I started off with a red-brown number 47 as a base coat. I then went over in a patchy sort of marbling sort of effect with 17 Cocoa Brown. Please excuse my compressor. I'll wait for it to finish. Doesn't normally take long. There we go. I then went over that with a 0.2 needle instead of 0.4 with orange. This bit didn't quite go to plan. In hindsight, what I should have done was done the oranges first and then done the darker colours afterwards, because they didn't quite show up as I planned. And after that, I went over with orange yellow to try and brighten it up somewhat. It didn't go as I planned, but the effect is still there, sort of. Once the chipping's done, it should still look okay. It's just going to look like older rust as opposed to fresh rust, which is fine. I went over that with a very, very light matte coat just to seal all of that in, and then I just literally squirted it with hairspray straight from the can. I didn't bother decanting through my airbrush. I just squirted it at the can. Doesn't take much, and it dries really quickly. That's all dry now, as you can see. It still looks shiny, just because of the paint, and I didn't really go over that heavy with the matte coat, as it was just literally a light dust. So I'm going to get on now and put the top coat on, which is going to be light brown, number 27 from Mr. Hobby Aqueous. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. So once that's done, we'll then come back and start the chipping. Right, I've got the engine sprayed pretty much an even coat using the beige colour, and I'm going to have a crack at hopefully reactivating the hairspray and doing some chipping. I've got a bowl of warm water. I've got a couple of old stiff brushes, so they're quite fairly stiff bristles. They're just from a cheap artist brush set, and that one I've cut really short. So it's literally, you just use the brush in the water and you just jab it on, basically. I'm going to see if we can get this to work on camera. There's a good chance I'll abort this because sometimes it can take a while to get it to start working. If that's going to be the case, then what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and do this off camera and then come back when it's done. Okay, so I've got the basic chipping done to reveal the rust. So you can see the effect is subtle, but it's quite effective. You can see this didn't quite work as I was expecting because it's gone through, back through to the plastic, and I'm not sure why. It's possible that I've missed a step. It's been a while since I've done this, and I've only done this a couple of times in the past, so it's a technique that I've not quite got the knack of yet. I'll disguise those just by using some of the Tamiya Weathermasters, and I'll just use one of the rust colours from there just to blend those in. It's not really a big issue with going for a weathered engine because it's the look that you're going for. So I'll go and carry on with this and the rest of the parts, and then come back to you once I'm a bit further forward. So very quickly then, before I get on with the rest of this, I've gone over this with a couple of the different Tamiya Weathermaster palettes, just fairly randomly, disguised in those spots that I was a little overzealous. And you can see the result is really quick and quite impressive. Once everything else is put together and that's had a wash over, that will look a fairly passable, weathered, used, hard-working engine. Okay, so I've progressed on a little bit with this. I've started assembling the engine block and started doing a little bit of the detail painting that needs doing. Need to fix that. I'm just quickly going to go over this rust kit, for the lack of a better word. I have already applied it to a couple of parts just to see how it works, because I haven't really used it before. So I'm gonna do this bit on camera, or try to. It's going to be a little bit tricky because you need to give this, well, it says you need to allow this binder first to dry. That's not strictly true. You just allow it, you need it to become tacky so that the pigment will bind to it. So my research shows that on these turbos, it was only these outer pipes that actually seem to rust. The inner bit, on all of the photos I've seen, has remained this tan colour. So I've sort of been able to replicate that on the other one, which I might redo because that was my first attempt and it didn't go particularly well. I've also made a nice mess here. I don't know if you can see that because I knocked this bottle over. So I'm going to have to redo all of this afterwards. But I'll worry about that later. So just using a relatively old brush. This kind of looks like PVA, watered down PVA. It's not. I'm not sure what it is. It's got like a bluish tint to it, as you'll see. So going to apply this just to where I want the pigment to go. So it's pretty easy to do, to control. The pigment's only going to stick where you put this, where you paint this on. You don't need too much. It really depends on the effect you're going for. If you want quite a bumpy surface, then you can put this and the pigment on a little bit thicker, and you can also, when you put the pigment on, you can also manipulate it a bit to make it form clumps. For this, I wanted more of a surface rust, so I don't need very much of it. I'll show you this in a minute, what I mean by this kind of bluey greenish tint that it's got to it. It kind of looks like oxidized metal. I don't know if oxidized is the right term, but kind of looks like the effect that metal has over time with age and moisture, or I don't know, I'm not a chemist. So I'm just applying this fairly quickly. I'm hoping this is picking me up on camera. I should have zoomed in actually. We'll sort that in a moment. And then once I put this on, I will pause the recording for a few minutes just to give this chance to dry and go tacky, and then show you how to apply the powder, and then finally the developer that will bring out the rust. The other thing with the developer as well is you can vary the shade of the rust by how long you leave the developer on for. If you want it a nice bright red or reddish, then leave it on for longer. If you want it like a warm, I think like a grey is the only way I can describe it, then you try and remove it quite quickly. The way I do that is I just dab it onto the kitchen roll just to pull it off. That's the easiest way. Now I'll show you this. I don't know how well you can see. It's got like it's strange, it's got like a pearlescent shine to it. It's very strange. So I'll pause here and give that chance to dry for a couple of minutes, and then I'll come back. Right, so that dries quite quickly. It's gone quite tacky now. So I'm going to put the pigment on, or the powder. The easiest way I found to do this, the kit says to use a spatula. I tried that and it just made a huge mess. So the easiest way is to use a pipette. It doesn't always work because it's obviously gravity, it pours it out, but it seems to work quite well with this as long as you don't move it too much. So, and I'm going to use this to capture any so that it doesn't stick, just so that I can reuse it later. Let me just see if I can zoom you in a bit. Just hopefully you'll be able to see a bit better. Just make sure it's covered on everywhere that you applied the solution to, and then just tap off the excess. I might have to do another application of this because it's not stuck everywhere, although don't do what I just did. Just tap off the excess. So I'll just zoom back out. So you can see that's the powder stuck on. It's only sticking to where I applied the solution. Try and keep you on camera. So I'll give that a couple of minutes. It does tend to dry quite quickly, but I'll just give that a couple of minutes just to take hold, and then I'll show you applying the developer. Okay. Okay, so that's had a few minutes to dry. That's stuck on quite well. So you got the developer now, which is kind of like looks like mouthwash. I wouldn't recommend drinking it. This, what I would normally do is just drop this over the lid and then just dispose of what goes in the lid afterwards, just so that you're not putting used liquid back into your main liquid. Use the pipette and just put a drop somewhere just so you can show you it working. So you just put it on like that, and you can already see it's starting to react. Depending on the colour of the rust you want is how long you leave it on for. So I don't want it too red, so I'm just going to just cover the rest of this. And then what I'll do is, once I'm happy with the level, I'll just dab it on some kitchen roll just to pull the liquid off, and it will stop the reaction. And then you just let it dry. This pipette isn't the best. Missed a huge chunk there. Like I said, if you do miss any, like I've got some areas that I've missed, you can just wait for it to fully dry and then just carefully repeat the process. The binder, you can quite target with a small paintbrush, and then you can see that's developing quite nicely. You can see it's bringing out all those nice deep red rust shades. That's about where I want it. So literally just dab that. You can see the kitchen roll just pulls the excess off, and it will just stop the reaction at that point. Gotta be careful not to pull as I've done, I've just pulled a load of the binder off. I probably should have let the binder dry a little bit more. But as you can see, it's quite effective. Like I said, it's a bit fudgy. I'll need to do that again just to get the bits that I've missed. But it's very, very effective. This is the exhaust manifold I've already done. It's had a chance to dry. I'm hoping that's really poor light. Just move my light over so I can hopefully see it a bit better. I'll put some photographs up as well. Just some still shots as well, just because my camera will be better than the video camera. So see, on the inside I did leave it on for a lot longer and it's a lot brighter. Probably not showing up very well on the camera, but that's fairly dry. It will take a few hours to properly dry, and you'll need to maybe use some sort of a clear varnish just to seal it. But I don't know. I've like I said, I've not really used it very much. If anybody has had some experience with this stuff and knows, you know, feel free to drop me a note in the comments. So that's it for this little bit. I'm gonna go away and carry on doing some more bits to the engine, and then when I come back the engine should be fairly complete. Right, okay, so I've progressed with the majority of the engine up to where I am in the instructions anyway. I've finished off the rusting that I was doing on the turbo and got everything assembled together. I haven't yet given it a wash. I'm not sure now if I'm going to, because it's quite beaten up already, and has been pointed out to me that they probably didn't get this bad when they were in use. Google, the research I was able to do via Google, because I know nothing about US trucks. So the research I was able to do via Google did suggest that there were plenty of examples where they do get beaten up. So it's subjective. I'll show you where I'm at. So I've tweaked my light a bit to try and give you a little bit better look. I've got a couple of small decals that need to go on. I'll do those at another time. You can see the way the rusting came out. It may not be 100% realistic, but I'm quite happy with the look, the way the rust looks. The rust itself, I think, looks pretty realistic, even if it may not be realistic for this engine. Certainly not an in-use engine anyway, but I'm really happy with the way that's come out. So I'm going to, the next thing I have to do after this is start work on the chassis. So I'm probably going to, I'm waving off camera, I'm probably going to end this episode here, and when I come back for the next one, I'll start work on the chassis and get the engine fitted. There's a few hoses that need to go on. I've not put those on yet. I'll do those when it comes to fitting the engine into the chassis as well. So that'll be it for this episode. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.